spy trial. Author's lawyer says there was nothing improper in Kinnock's phone call. Cary Grant, the gentleman of Hollywood, is dead. Botham shows no mercy as England pile on the pressure. And wide-eyed and helpless, the orphan who's in safe hands. Good evening. The judge in the MI5 case in Australia is expected to decide in the next few hours whether documents at the heart of the Peter Wright spy book affair can be handed over to the defence. The government here wants them kept secret and the book itself banned. In the Commons, opposition MPs are demanding explanations from Mrs Thatcher and the Attorney-General. The Conservatives have attacked Labour over Mr Kinnock's telephone calls to the lawyer opposing the government case, Mr Malcolm Turnbull. Mr Turnbull said today there was nothing improper in the calls. Mr Kinnock, who's in America, said he was told nothing that wasn't publicly available.
This is a crucial week for Mrs Thatcher and her Attorney-General Sir Michael Havers, as their decisions on spy cases come under scrutiny in the Commons and in courts in Australia and Ireland. Tomorrow, the Attorney-General Sir Michael Havers will be asked what role he played in allowing publication of Chapman Pincher's book. In Australia, Mr Justice Powell decides whether secret documents on the case, which he's read, can be given to the defence. And in Dublin, there's also a court case as the government tries to block distribution of another spy book by former officer Joan Miller. Then on Tuesday, Mrs Thatcher herself faces questions in the Commons. And on Wednesday, David Owen leads an alliance attack on the way the government runs the security services. Labour leader Neil Kinnock won't be there on any of those days. He's in America, but he won't be forgotten. Conservatives have launched a united campaign today against the Labour leader for his contacts with the solicitor defending Peter Wright in Australia. Mr Heseltine accused him of undermining the coherence of the security services. Sir William Clark said his behaviour was monstrous. Sir Adam Butler said it was disgraceful. Meanwhile, Labour's Dale Campbell-Savers threatens to name up to 43 people who he says have also passed on secret information.
It gives me no joy in having to name these people, but it's the government who've brought it upon themselves. It is they who say they have to use the courts to prevent the Wright publication, whilst, of course, they know that most of what Mr Wright has said is already in the public domain, so why proceed there?
Mrs Thatcher was, however, refusing to say anything about the case at all and ignoring Labour protesters as she visited Dulwich in London, where she's bought a new home. She was there to turn on some Christmas lights. In another bizarre twist to a story with as many turns as a Le Carré novel, the Mail on Sunday added a new name to the story this morning. They named the lawyer to the security services, who they say advised Mrs Thatcher to stop the Wright book. The paper was told not to give the name on security grounds, and it had gone in the next edition. The Sunday Times, which chose to link the mystery lawyer with the 1981 decision not to stop the Pincher book, just called him Mr Bernard X.
Today, Mr Kinnock dismissed calls from Conservative MPs that he should return to London. He's in Atlanta meeting civil rights leaders, this morning laying a wreath on the tomb of Martin Luther King. He accused Tory MPs who are calling for his return of simply trying to divert attention from the Prime Minister.
Well, they're very superficial, and they're an effort by some Tory backbenchers to try and guard the tail of the government, which is a very exposed tail. And I think it would be a foolish overreaction to respond to them in any way that treats them seriously. They're about some dirty business, but it doesn't distract from the fact that the government really is in a very difficult position as a consequence of its own conduct. The issue is, why did the government take a certain set of actions in 1981 and in very similar circumstances an entirely different set of actions in 1986? They have got to explain that.
So you're not on the defensive here?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'd rather be in my shoes than Mrs Thatcher's.
Mr Kinnock was the guest of Atlanta's Mayor Andrew Young, who accompanied the Labour leader to Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King was once the pastor. It was a low-key start to the Labour leader's visit before the real political business begins, with visits to New York and Boston. For Mr Kinnock, the real work begins tomorrow as he starts to sell Labour's non-nuclear defence policy to what will be a rather sceptical American audience. Ken Rees, ITN, Atlanta.
Colonel Oliver North, the man fired by President Reagan last week for his undercover activities, has been linked even closer tonight with the Contra rebel operation in Nicaragua. Reports circulating in Washington in the last hour claim that Colonel North used profits from Iranian arms sales to run a small American air force to deliver weapons to the Contras. Colonel North was fired from the National Security Council last week. Government officials now say he managed a broader contra-aid network for 2 years with the president's blessing, despite a congressional ban. His air operation came to light in October when an American-manned cargo plane was shot down over Nicaragua. 2 Americans were killed and 1 crewman, Eugene Hagenfuss, is now serving a 30-year sentence. President Reagan paid his own tribute tonight to Cary Grant, the great gentleman of Hollywood who died today after a stroke. Mr. Reagan said his elegance, wit and charm will endure forever. Cary Grant, who was 82, died after rehearsing for a celebrity appearance in Iowa. Friends say the bulk of his £40 million fortune will now go to his daughter. Cary Grant's light comical touch was illustrated by his famous reply to a telegram from a show business magazine asking, "How old, Cary Grant?" He answered, "Old Cary Grant fine, how you?" Terry Lloyd looks at his life.
He was born plain Alexander Archibald Leach, the son of a tailor from Bristol. But he soon developed a taste for the theatre, and at 14 he left home to join a troupe of acrobats. They took him to America, where the budding debonair actor changed his name to Cary Grant. The actress Mae West claims she was the first to spot his potential, and they appeared together in I'm No Angel.
Guess how much I love you.
I never guess. You gotta show me. Now, I hope you realize
Some of his finest and most comical performances were with Katharine Hepburn. Here they starred in Bringing Up Baby.
Oh! Don't just stand there. Do something. Do something. Oh, my goodness. Well, get behind me.
I am behind
Well, get
you.
closer.
I can't get any closer now. Now, you ready? Now, be calm. Left foot first.
All right.
A few critics say he should have concentrated more on improving his reputation as a serious actor. Yet he proved them wrong when he teamed up with the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, for several dramas such as North by Northwest. He retired from the cinema in 1966, disappointed at not winning an Oscar. But in 1970, that was put right when he was presented with the coveted award for his special contribution to American films. Privately, he'd become something of a recluse, avoiding the press whenever possible. On occasions, however, like this one 2 years ago, the cameras were there to hear the movie heartthrob reflect back on his star-studded life.
I've never aspired to be a saint. They must be rather difficult to live with. Yet, on the other hand, an embittered old person is a constant burden. Please give me the ability to see good in unlikely places and talents in unexpected people.
Cary Grant, the matinee idol, was married 5 times. The last, in 1977, was to public relations consultant Barbara Harris. She was with him when the man nicknamed Peter Pan by Hollywood died in Iowa overnight.
The film star Cary Grant, who died today. Mordecai Vanunu, the nuclear technician who revealed details of Israel's nuclear weaponry, was seen briefly today for the first time since he disappeared in London 6 weeks ago. The bearded Vanunu was driven away at high speed from Jerusalem's district court. He faces charges of treason and espionage. Cricket. England are well on top in the second test at Perth. At the end of the third day, Australia still needed 84 to avoid the follow-on.
England have a spring in their heels, and no wonder. Everything's going their way. Even Botham's long hops are coming up trumps. A brilliant catch by Broad, and Marsh was gone for 15. Night watchman Waugh made the most of his promotion and helped himself to 50. But at the other end, Dean Jones had his problems, and Botham had his tantrums.
Botham is not happy at all.
If he was hopping mad before lunch, the first ball afterwards had him jumping for joy. Waugh out for 71. England's spinners are haunting the Australians. Dean Jones fell to Edmonds, and Australia were 128 for 4. The beleaguered Border had another mammoth task ahead, and he was struggling to avoid more than just the follow-on. But Australia's captain is nothing if not a battler, and he proved it today.
Beautifully timed.
Greg Ritchie threatened briefly before he too surrendered to spin.
And he's got him.
Steadily, Border began to dominate the bowling just as England's batsmen had. And the talkative Greg Matthews was typically defiant.
It's in the air and wide of third slip.
But as he edged his way towards 50, he had England's all-rounder in a rage again. And when you do that, Botham usually has the last say.
He scored, and what a great catch by Botham.
Matthews gone for 45. At the close, Border was still there on 81. He's Australia's only hope in a seemingly hopeless situation. Mark Austin, ITN Sport, Australia.
In soccer, bottom of the First Division Newcastle United ended West Ham's unbeaten away record this afternoon. Newcastle looked the better side from the start, Neil MacDonald getting there first after half an hour.
And it's there!
4 minutes later, a Peter Beardsley cross gave Andy Thomas Newcastle's second.
Thomas is waiting in the middle!
In the second half, Beardsley set up Newcastle's third, finished by Darren Jackson. And 10 minutes from time, Andy Thomas made it 4-0.
And another shot!
Finally, a tiny abandoned bush baby is getting the 5-star treatment. Keepers at Bristol Zoo are hand-feeding him by day and taking him home at night.
The tiny nocturnal creature with the big brown eyes had to be rescued from his colony because the others were mistreating him. But round-the-clock attention and a diet of mashed banana and baby's milk has more than doubled his birth weight to a whole ounce. His keepers have named him Pookie. They're thrilled to see him so full of energy and admit to becoming more than slightly attached.
Dare I say extremely attached to him. But I do realise he's a wild animal and will have to go back with his own kind when he grows up.
Pookie's progress should see him fully grown to half a pound in a few months' time, but until he's weaned, it's home with one of his keepers every night. You might wonder who's keeping an eye on who. Anne Nankerville for ITN at Bristol Zoo.
And that's the news tonight, except a reminder that all this week, ITN's News at 1 will be carrying a series of reports on AIDS, starting tomorrow with the largest opinion poll on the subject. But that's all from us this weekend. Good night.